lately I've been thinking about stories and how they're not new stories. Um, that everything kind of comes down to the same few narratives, and this can be applied in many different ways. But to put it into a different frame, there have been a few times in my life where I've really wanted advice, and I want wisdom to be able to navigate specific situations. Few that come to mind are in creating things, and then also in romantic pursuits, being able to get people's input. And I found that trustworthy people who I think have the experience to justifiably give an answer, will end up giving you the same set of advice. It's usually not new. It's it's you'll hear it and you'll get kind of disappointed because you're like, but I wanted the quick answer that was like, I was missing this the entire time, and if I had just known this, I would have avoided so much trouble. But it's usually like, you should brush your teeth every morning, or you should listen to your wife and listen to what she has to say. And you're like, I guess that was the right answer. I was hoping it would just be, something a lot simpler and not requiring me to, change as a person, because I think that's the last thing anybody really wants to do is they don't really want to change, right? Not really. I think a lot of us say we want to change sometimes. And when you're confronted with what that means to change, like the change means that the thing that was there is no longer there anymore. It's something new. That's real change. And that is frightening. It's frightening beyond belief. But that's off topic. The same thing is true with stories, right? You have stories that when you look at them and you read enough stories, you see the patterns. That fairy tales are retellings of the same, four or so stories. Man, I cannot speak today. Over and over again. And it's not quite Hero of a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell, right? It's not one story. There are several story structures, and they're all very important. You have the hero's journey, you have the descent into the underworld. There's you can find them if you want to. But that's never discouraged anybody that I've seen who makes stories or writes stories or tells stories. Because there's a certain freedom in having a frame to work out of. If I have this story, I can not worry about it, right? If it's so embedded, I think the best storytellers are the ones that don't even have to think about it. It's embedded in the way that they think about things. And they have this wide library in their minds of the way stories are told, and they can draw from it and create new things. And I think this is true not just of, obviously storytelling, but it's true of many other things, whether it be art or, working on code or any of these. That if you go down to it, there are a few fundamental principles of the world. And the applications, the ways that these things play out, are just almost infinite. What was another case? I mean, we can just talk about this, right? Like, in work, often the advice that's given is just do it. How do I get better? What tools should I buy? If you ever see that anywhere, and somebody asks, what tools should I buy for art or a project, 99.9% of the time, if the person is really good at what they do, they say it really doesn't matter. As long as you don't super cheap out, you're probably fine. Because it's never the tools that actually make that much of a difference, unless there's this tool that, it's very rare. Let's just say that. It's very rare that happens. What other kind of advice giving? It's like practice, right? That's another big one. Everybody wants to find a way to get good really fast. And every artist worth their scrap, or every technician or whatever, they just say, do it. Like, iterate over and over and over again. There's an old story of the pottery class, where there's one side of the class that is asked to make, is going to get graded on the weight of their pots, that they produce, just the sheer quantity, and the other one is going to be rated on their best. And the ones that are rated on their best performed much worse than the ones that just, arbitrarily were making things, and in the process they made more beautiful pottery. Because the incentive structure encouraged it. That just having experience with clay itself was an encouragement to play, to create without having to worry about the quality. You just do it. And so when you learn all these things, there's a point where asking for advice anymore is not useful, because you've already heard it all, right? And it's just time to move on. It's time to actually put it into action, or move on with your life. It's one or the other. I think a lot of times people kind of sit on the edge, and it's not a good place to be. It's time to move. So if you find yourself in a place like that, that's my encouragement, is that chances are you've heard that advice already. You've read something somewhere. Maybe you haven't. That's fair too. But that type of advice is usually universally applicable. There's some stuff about the specifics on how it plays out. Those can be helpful. Where do I learn about how to do something? That's one that seems to be pretty unique. But usually it's by doing, right? If you can find someone who will stand by you while you do something, or teach you how to do it, and you don't spend your time reading all the time, or thinking about doing something, but instead, living it out, like write, instead of thinking about writing. That's the way to go. So that's probably advice you've already heard, and maybe I'll find out someday how change actually happens. But until then, what's an outro? Gosh, smell you later. I think that's Sonic. Sonic says smell you later. Oh.